Welcome to another episode of Know Thyself. We are learning. It is good to know more about the Lord and His wonderful character. And that's what is the aim and the mission of this program, especially understanding His character as a counselor. As counselors and as counselees, we need to know our position, determined in and through the Word of God. Let's get into today's program. Welcome, Father. Welcome, Sister. So, Father, one of the other characters is this widow from Nain who lost everything in life. No husband, the son is dead. But we have Jesus coming in with such compassion and such beautiful love that He does something beautiful. If we can discuss that, both on the psychological aspect and the spiritual aspect of it.
Okay, yeah. That is a good character. As we do, I think it is better that we read from the scripture, yes, the passage, and see how Luke presents this person. Wonderful. And yeah, the event. It is given in the Gospel of Luke chapter 7, verses 11 to 17. Soon afterward, he went to a city called Nain, and his disciples and a great crowd went with him. As he drew near to the gate of the city, behold, a man who had died was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a large crowd from the city was with her. And when the Lord saw her, He had compassion on her, and said to her, "Do not weep." And He came and touched the bier, and the bearers stood still. And He said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." And the dead man sat up and began to speak. And He gave him to his mother. Fear seized them all, and they glorified God, saying, "A great prophet has arisen among us, and God has visited His people." Wow. And this report concerning Him spread through the whole of Judea and all the surrounding country. So this is the report from the Gospel of Luke. So here we are presented with a widow whose only son has died. And it's also interesting how Jesus comes to this place, Nain. The previous episode is in Capernaum. And between Capernaum and Nain, there is about 45 kilometers distance.
Wow.
So Jesus heals the centurion's son or servant and comes all the way south to Nain. Nain is about 45 kilometers south of Capernaum. And there is nothing else but this particular healing, and he goes. It would seem Jesus purposely comes to this particular place only to give life to a young man. That's one side. So Jesus is on the way. And here we see a procession coming out of the town. And the procession carrying a dead young man. And it said the young man was the only son of a widow. So it would be also interesting to look a little bit into the situation of women and widows, especially in Israel. You know, women as such did not have any independent existence of their own. So as a child, she is dependent on the father. And it is the duty of the father to get her married to a man. And the father receives the money for that girl. So the one who gets the wife has to pay the father. And then when she is married at the age of 12, 13, then she is subject to the husband. And it is the duty of the wife to produce children. And if she is barren, it is her fault. So no male infertility was understood at that time. If a woman doesn't have a child, it is her fault, a barren woman. And then, so only duty is to serve the husband and their fruits. So bring male children mostly. So if a person fails to bring children, she is cursed. So she considers to be cursed because God has stopped her womb. And then if the husband dies, an untimely death, then the wife is responsible for that. It is because of some of her fault that the man died. So if they have no child, if the man dies, it is all her fault. And then when the husband dies, she comes, if she has a son, the son has to protect her. and she becomes subject to her son. And if she has nobody, then she can be remarried, but that is very, very rare. So then she has to be kept in the house alone. So this is a widow, bereft of any right. And here we are presented with a widow who has only son, and the only son died. So you can see the miserable situation this widow is in. Now she has nobody. The people already blamed him because her husband died, now her son also died. So he is in an inconsolable situation. She is crying. And she is crying and coming out with a broken heart, broken life, not knowing what to do next, to bury her son. So there is a procession of death coming out of the town. You have to keep that in mind. On the other hand comes another procession, Jesus who brings the life. He walks all the way, 45 kilometers, to encounter this procession.
Wow.
And the two processions meet at the city gate. That is very interesting to see. You know? So life and death stand face to face. Mm-hmm. I am the life and resurrection, Jesus says, and he is the one who is dead. And so this encounter, Jesus comes to encounter death in its most cruel situation. And see how Jesus tells her, when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her. That is one thing, he had compassion. The compassion, the Greek word is splanchnitzein. Splanchne is the inner organs, and that goes back to the Hebrew rechem. Rahamim, you know, the Allahu Rahamim, they call it. Rahamim, the compassion. The God is the compassionate. Rechem means womb. So Rahamim is the compassion, the feeling of the mother towards an unborn child. So this is what stirs. The splanchnitzein means something like that. In your intestines, the bowels are somehow tight. So it's a feeling that embraces all your being. So this is not just something concocted, kind of artificial thing. He really felt with it. In his body, he felt the compassion, the sorrow of the woman. That's where it starts. Jesus, the compassionate.
Right.
And God is the compassionate. And he goes and tells her, do not weep. Like that is a normal thing, and sisters, you will like to say something about it. Like, he tells, do not weep. It's not an empty word. Because he is going to take away the reason for the weeping, the tears. And then he goes on, came and touched the by an action by which he himself renders unclean. A person who touches a dead body becomes unclean for the whole day. That is the purity, and he doesn't care. And the bearers stood still, and then, young man, I say to you, arise. And I think it has a much more deeper implication. We may have the time now or later. So what does it mean to rise? Young man, rise. He's apparently come to life. Rise. And the dead man sat up and began to speak. As a sign that he is alive. And he gave him to his mother. So she has no more reason to weep. So this is the situation of how Jesus comes, takes all the trouble to come all the way here and restore the life to the widow and goes. And we can see also the compassion in Jesus and the situation of the widow. And maybe we can have a deeper understanding into a counselor-counselor relationship and how you get out of this mood.
Jesus was aware of the helpless situation of the woman, because after this burial, she will become the property of her next relative. And whether he would care for her, use her as a slave, whatever he does, we would not know. And this was the situation for her. So he knew all that. He was in the society, the social there. So she knew the reason for her weeping so deeply, so helplessly weeping. She was really burying herself with her son if she was going to bury that. And that was but Jesus was not going to allow that. So he comes and tell her, do not weep. When somebody sees weeping, most of the time we tell them, don't cry, because your tears make me uncomfortable. it's difficult for the other person, seeing cry. I used to tell the students when I am giving training, if you tell somebody don't cry, you must be able to take away the reason for crying.
Right.
If you cannot take away that reason, allow the person to cry. Be in that crying, be with the person in their crying. And because tears has a tremendous effect of washing away the pain, the heart. And I remember earlier in school studying a poem saying, she must weep or she will die. Because her dead husband was brought in and she stood there totally paralyzed. And she was not showing any emotion. And I also remember once a child who died, a 2-year-old child died. And no tears came out of the mother. She kept on saying, he is gone, he was this and that. And I knew she had to cry. So after the burial, the next day, I went back to their house. And I really prayed with her, very emotionally prayed, and she began to cry. Immediately, other woman said, don't cry. Here I was trying to make her cry, and the other one saying, don't cry. I said, no, let her cry, because she has to cry, because her child is lost, and the pain she has to be washed out with her tears. And she cried, and after a while, it became much more peaceful in that sense. So I think most of the time we say, do not weep, only to make me feel better. We are not thinking about the other person. When another person cries, usually I don't say don't cry, because stay with the person when they are crying. And there are incidents, I remember, I walked into a room, she said something about her past, and I just touched at her feeling, she began to cry. She cried a lot. After crying and everything, she said, I haven't cried for years. And that was really a healing touch for her in the sense. So crying has its own place in there. If I cannot take away the reason for crying, let them cry and be with them. Jesus has said, weep with those who are weeping, smile with those who are smiling. So we should be able to weep with the other person when they are weeping. So Jesus told her, do not weep, because he knew he was going to restore her son to life, and the reason he was going to be taken away. Very often we are not able to do that. When a child dies, when the husband dies, the wife cries, or a parent dies, the mother cries, children cry. Okay, this crying has a lot of feeling in their sense. Be uncomfortable and stay with that uncomfortable feeling. Once a man was being buried. He did not want the tomb. He wanted the real dug deep in the cemetery. And as the soil was falling on the tree, it was kind of, there is a feeling in there. And the son, he was my student, but he's a big man there. He just embraced me and cried, and my tears also came out. I didn't say anything, everybody. Because there is the pain of losing his father, and also the reality of burial was very much there. And he cried, and that it's okay. And you see, we allow people to cry, because that crying has a healing power to it. If I cannot take away the reason for crying, apparently I don't have the capacity to take away the...
Even Jesus cried. You know, for example, when he saw
Lazarus.
Martha and Mary and the
crying.
Jews crying, Jesus also wept.
Right.
Jesus
So
wept, yeah.
crying is something very, very healthy.
And it has a deep feeling to it.
Right.
And that crying was... and that's why see, you cry with them. Once I remember our pastor, a young woman came in, and she was on the wheelchair. To the university, most of the dormitories didn't have the wheelchair facility, and she was looking for a place to stay. And at the center we didn't have it, or the house we had also had the stairs. So he was talking about it, in the homily, and the tears came out of him. Later he said, I was embarrassed that I cried. I said, no, your tears had a lot of feeling in it. And the people were appreciated that you had such a compassion for that girl. And so we get often embarrassed that we have tears. But the tears have a lot of communication to do. We usually don't understand it. But at the same time, if we are willing to deal with it, it's deep meaning. I don't cry with somebody for simply. Only when it touches me, my tears will come out. And when like tears comes out, it has a meaning to it. And Jesus knew that. And that's why he cried with those who cried. And this woman, just touching her and healing her will not do. He knew she needs some more time to life. She was apparently not that old. And this boy had to be restored to her. Otherwise, her future would have been totally blank.
Right.
And he was walking into a situation, it has no future to it. Granted, all the people who were there, came to express their compassion and care for her. But after the funeral, they all will leave. And she will be left alone as a ward of her nearest relative, whoever it was. The widow, I think, was the most helpless person in Israel, more than anybody else. Women's situation was very bad. And that's why the men used to pray, thank God for not creating me as a woman, because they knew how pathetic their condition was. They say it was, her position was not any better than a Gentile slave. That means she has no right.
I also feel that Jesus could have put himself in that position, because I believe at that time maybe even Mary was a widow, the mother of Jesus, and he would have thought that, in that way. How
I don't know if he had thought about himself, but I think he had put himself on her position there and saying, if I am in this situation, how helpless I would feel. That is empathy.
Right.
In counseling, that is what
Maybe I think there is what Anand has said more in it. Mary was a widow, and Mary will be also weeping over a son.
Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe he could see in this widow of Nain his own mother crying, and not only his own mother, so many. Right. So he being caught and he is seeing all the pain of this woman. And somehow he sees the pain of all. This is only a symptomatic of one episode. And this has also some relation to, the narration has a relation to the Old Testament, Elijah raising the son of the widow.
Right.
So there is a great likeness, so affinity between the two. And when the crowd saw this, they erupted into praising. They started praising God and shouting, a great prophet has risen in our midst, and God has visited his people. Wonderful. So this great act of compassion reveals God's visitation. So in Jesus, God is coming to visit. And I think when you can somehow help the people not only to weep, but also to wipe the tears, then they realize the presence of God. It's the real comfort comes from God. And in order to have this, give this comfort, first of all, we have this compassion. Or what your sister was calling the empathy. Empathy is good, sympathy is not bad. The word pati comes from pathein, Greek pathein. Pathein means suffer. Empathy, so suffer with. Sympathy is also suffer with. You suffer with the other person. So it's not looking down upon a person. You are really suffering. Sympathy means to suffer with. So somehow the word sympathy has a kind of bad connotation that you are being very sympathetic about it, that you are someone great up there coming down, and empathy has a better.
That is what the psychological difference what they make it. When your sympathy means I am here, you are down there. I feel bad for you. In empathy, in the sense you are getting in the shoes with that person.
You're into
And
action,
efficient-
more
into
into
action.
action.
In fact, the
feeling
word itself doesn't have that meaning.
But,
Sympathy,
that is
to
what
suffer with, you're
usually-
suffering with. But usually you have this misunderstanding.
But are both these words mean the same, Father? How do you see the difference between?
Same thing.
Same.
Sun with M with also.
Okay.
So the
Okay.
suffering. So only the English usage of the two. The
Right.
sympathy, sympathein means suffer with.
Right.
So you are suffering with that person. So that is exactly empathy, putting into the shoes. But usually, so they have this misunderstanding. You feel some sympathy. You are well and okay, and
The
you
other
are
person is
miserable. So I feel sympathy for you. Good. But the word sympathy originally meant much more. And because it has lost its sense, we have coined the new
Empathy,
words.
another word.
New idea
Yeah.
itself.
Empathy.
But here, something different happens. Immediately, they see a prophet in their midst, a God who loves them, a God who cares. And that is what really exuberant in that sense. The people were really happy about it.
Right.
I would like to point a little bit on that young man, the only son of a widow. We don't know how old, a young man, maybe 20 something. And he's dead, lifeless. And see what Jesus tells him. Listen, they wake up, arise, sit up. A person who is dead, or as if dead, lying there, rise. And this young man stood up, or sat up, and started speaking. Okay, this is normally speaking, it's a sign that he's alive. But then, if you really look into it, the three words, Jesus' command to get up, stand up. And the reaction, he sat up and started speaking. And put it into the relation, you can maybe reflect on it, the youth of today. Where are we with our youth? What is happening, the vast majority of the youth today, are they really alive or are they just lost? What do they speak? So do we not have to bring a new life into this youth? So when I see all these television programs and what are happening with the youth and the drugs and see all this way the youth are being destroyed, manipulated, exploited, destroyed by so many mafia. And knowingly or unknowingly, people become victim and become really dead, even though physically alive. Are we not facing a youth that is actually dying or dead? The values are gone, and the new values that are being imbued bring them to death. Drugs and drinks and perverted sex. And somehow you are isolated, and I hear about young people spending 10 hours, 18 hours with the computer, with the mobile, chatting and cheating with each other. So in this situation, I think what Jesus says, rise up. You are not to lie down here like that. Rise. And this young man, as he sat up and he started speaking. And our dead young also have to stand up and speak. Speak about the oppression. Speak about the exploitation. Speak about how they are being exploited, misused, and misguided. People have to speak.
Right.
And I think psychology has a lot to give to that, to speak for the truth.
Actually, the youth are not aware of the dying culture they are seeped in, because they think allowing them to use the smartphone and watch any kind of movie and everything is freedom for them. And they think having the money to buy the drugs and use them is freedom for them. Having them, even though there is an age limitation for drinking, they cheat and older students get them and drink them and have a this is all the wrong sense of freedom they are having it. That's what they call it, freedom in the sense. But, and in most cases, the parents are not giving good example. Parents are chatting with somebody else, And there was one case once came and I heard that the father was chatting with a young woman, and finally they decided to meet. And when they met, it was his own daughter. And she was very cool about it, and he was shocked. And she said, Dad, why do you worry about it? Listen. So when we do not, it's one thing to give advice, but another thing to give a good example.
Right.
The marital relationship and their security and their deep relationship, father and mother being faithful to each other, is a great model for the children. And it is all right to give children freedom to use the internet, but watch out, put it in the public place there.
Right.
See what they are doing. They are not adults. They are young people who still need guidance. And when the money get into their hands, see what they are using it for. Don't give them money countlessly.
Correct.
Because they would buy it to get the drinks or drugs. Drugs use a lot of money. And when the kids ask for more and more money, ask what it is for. How are you using it? The children, the youth, until they are 21, 22 on their own, starting to work and make money, I think the parents have to guide them. And today that guidance is missing. Because with the new gen feeling, they feel that I have to give all things to my kids. But they do not see where this kid is going.
Right.
And that is death culture in that sense.
Yeah, that is the culture of death. Pope John Paul II was
Yeah.
the culture
And that
of
is
death.
what Jesus is saying, rise up.
Yeah.
Rise up from this death culture, sit up, and you can talk.
Okay.
So that was another wonderful episode on Know Thyself. Yes, we meet Jesus, our counselor, as the restorer of life. Yes, when he is there, death has to leave, for he himself is the life and the resurrection. If you have any questions or suggestions, you could always write to knowthyselfdtv@gmail.com. Let me repeat that. It's knowthyselfdtv@gmail.com. Till we meet you in another episode, God bless you. Thank you, Father.
Thank you.